Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing a heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. I'll talk very briefly about the author, go into an overview of what the book is about, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. I have a pretty long history with Dave Eggers. Me and Dave go way back. I first read him in the early 2000s in Spin Magazine, where he had a column. After Chuck Klosterman left, there was a space for a monthly columnist. And I don't know how long he was actually there for, but he wrote some things for it. I went on the Spin website to see if the articles were still up there. And they are, so I'm going to leave a link to one of them below, which is my favorite. Probably my favorite article on music that I've ever read, which is really less about music and more about snobbery. But he had a column in Spin called "And Now for a Less Informed Opinion" that I thought was really, really, really good. And that was probably 2004, 2005. I read a book he wrote called "Teachers Have It Easy," which he co-wrote with some other authors that I liked a lot, that I've recommended to people over the years quite a bit. And then he wrote another book I read called "The Circle," which I liked a lot less, and it was my introduction to his writing of fiction. I was surprised of how much I did not like "The Circle," but that was definitely a mixed novel for me. He's also probably still best known for writing this memoir, heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius, as well as being an editor with an organization. Works a little bit for McSweeney's, but he's an editor for their non-required reading of the year. And if you read any of those collections, they're all quite good. I've read a couple of them, and as my understanding, he's the editor for that, and usually has a little bit of an introduction to the year's pieces. That was good stuff too. And so he's done a lot of stuff. He's very, very prolific. He's written probably a book a year since this came out. This is his first published work in book form. Before this, he worked for some magazines, which I'll get to a little bit. But that's a long way to say I'm a big fan of Dave Eggers. And this is the first I've read this book, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, which is his memoir, and talks about the time. And he wrote this when I think he was like 29 or 30. He was relatively young. But really it covers the time span of when he was in his early 20s, and both of his parents die within 6 months of each other from cancer. Each of them have a different type of cancer, and they each die from cancer. And the family, Dave Eggers, his older brother, his older sister, and his younger brother, moved from the Chicagoland area to San Francisco, California, where his older brother, I think, moves to LA, but he essentially moves to San Francisco, and the book is about him coming to grips with the death of his parents, as well as him becoming the caretaker of his younger brother, who he refers in the novel to as Toph, Christopher Toph, and who is much younger than him. I think he's like 12 years younger than Dave Eggers. And so that's really what the book is really him dealing with that. There's some funny stories about him working for a magazine that he's trying to start up called Might Magazine. And then there's other funny stories, and also him trying out for The Real World. And I guess he is on what would be the third season of The Real World. When they're in San Francisco, he's on an episode for like 8 seconds of that show. But the book is very, very funny. Even given like the subject matter, it's very, very funny. Dave Eggers has very much a style of writing, and you either kind of like the humor or you don't. But I thought it was laugh out loud funny at parts. I think that tonally, Dave Eggers is able to kind of go back and forth between being serious but not overly serious, being funny but not overly funny, given kind of treating the subject matter with the weight it deserves in a really impressive way. And I just think he always seems to have the right image or analogy to use. Like that, I think, is one of his strongest points. He's able to give you these points of comparison that feel fresh, even though they may not always be super fresh analogies, but he is able to move them and bend them in such a way, and the writing is very conversational, that it feels like the right thing to say in the moment. And I think that he, especially in the first scene and the last scene, kind of paints this like beautiful image of, on one hand, two people who are realizing that their mother is dying and freaking out about it and panicking and not knowing what to do, and kind of going through this crazy checklist that you would do if that was happening, some things that are like non sequiturs and just kind of moving in a panic. And then the last scene of the book is him playing frisbee in the park with his brother. And I think both of those are kind of pitch perfect endpoints to the book. I'm not really a huge memoir fan, but I thought this was really, really well done. The things that I don't like about it were relatively minor. In the written copy that I have, the published copy, there's a huge, long preamble, which is kind of, to me, Dave Eggers at his worst, which is Dave Eggers in his like mode of being twee, in a similar manner to someone like Wes Anderson or Noah Baumbach. I learned that Dave Eggers co-wrote the movie We'll Fly Away, I think is the movie, with Maya Rudolph and I think it may be John Krasinski. I'm not sure who the other lead is. But that's really him and kind of his worst. And he does that in the first, there's like a 30-page breakdown of like symbolism in the novel, why he wrote the novel, his mixed feelings about writing the novel, what is true in the novel, what is not novel, what is true in the memoir, what is exaggerated in the memoir. And it just felt kind of exhausting, and I just kind of wanted to get to the beginning of it. There's a breakdown of his advance, and just kind of all these things. You're just kind of like, I wish you would just kind of get on with it. And that goes on for like 30 pages. I did dip into the audiobook, and the audiobook goes straight to the first scene. And I would recommend anybody who reads this just go straight to the first scene, because I think that's the best part of it. There's also a couple parts in the book where it drags. There are parts of the book where he has a device where he basically puts his thoughts into other people and has these kind of long conversations that couldn't really be actually happening. For instance, there's an interview where he's being interviewed for possibly being a cast member of The Real World. And it goes on for 30 pages, and it's just one of those things where he's like, clearly he's putting questions into the interviewer's mouth that the interviewer would never ask him. And he's going kind of on and on and on about his childhood in a way that like no interviewer has ever done. And so he does that a couple times and uses that device a few times in the book. And I think that's one of the places where it drags in the book. And I think there's probably about, 30 or 40 pages of the book that I felt were kind of long. And I thought, while the ending itself is very good, there are parts towards the end of the book that I wish the pace had kind of picked up a little bit. But it covers roughly, 8 years in his life, from the time that Christopher is 8 or 9 to the time where he's entering high school. So maybe that's 5 or 6 years. But that's the book. If you like memoirs and you are looking for an introduction to Dave Eggers, this is actually probably a pretty good place to start. Like I said, I mostly know his nonfiction stuff. The fiction work of his that I've read, I've not been impressed by. And I think you stylistically can kind of get the best of him. I also will leave a link below to that article, and it's a 3 or 4 page article, and like I said, it's probably the best music article I've ever read. So I'm a big fan of Dave Eggers, and I was happy with this book. If you're looking for a place to check him out, I would recommend it to you. If you've never read it before, I would recommend it. The only people I guess I probably wouldn't recommend it to, there's a lot of language in it, but it felt like it's never, in my opinion, gratuitous. It always feels like someone who's really working through these emotions, and the feelings that he has towards his parents after they pass is very much a mixture of different stuff, and it's never heavy-handed with how he's feeling about it, but it feels, sprinkled throughout it in a way that I thought was really definitely done. So, Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. If you're into memoir, check it out. If you've never read Dave Eggers before, it's probably a good jumping on point. And next time I will be either reviewing Anatomy of a Story by John Truby or Little Eve, a horror novel by Catriona Ward. If you have read any Dave Eggers fiction work that you recommend, if you could let me know below. Like I said, I read The Circle, and I was not overly impressed with it. I know he did a sequel to that, but if there's any other of his fiction that you think is worth checking out, please let me know. Until next time, bye.